Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you're joining us from. Welcome to our webinar on the year of the NGSOs. And if ever there was going to be a year that was for that purpose, this is the one. My name is Robert Bell. I'm Executive Director of the World Teleport Association, which, if you don't know us, is in the business of advocating for the interests of independent teleport operators, as well as their satellite partners and technology partners. But most importantly for them is promoting excellence in their operations, in their technology, and their business practices, which is really what we're going to be talking about today. And our topic is this report that was published about a month ago, the year of the NGSOs. Of course, one statistic captures it all. And at the end of 2023, Starlink had 2,000 satellites in orbit. They're well north of 6,000 at this point. OneWeb, Eutelsat is in the market, starting to move very aggressively wherever they have a license. We have SES rolling out mPower, and we have Kuiper coming in, starting service at the end of the year. So this is definitely that year. This is the product of something we call the Technology Advisory Board. It's a set of companies within our membership who are all in the technology business. And they're trying to deal with these rising challenges and opportunities coming from these sea changes in our business, from OTT and 5G, IoT, LEO, MEO, virtualization. Increasingly, teleport operators need to be technology experts, yeah, even though that may not be their background. So the Technology Advisory Board is there to provide guidance on tech advances and on smart buying options. It's a category that's open to membership, and that board is open to leader and patron members of our association that develop, manufacture, and market technology solutions. So if that sounds interesting to you and your company is in that category, please go ahead and reach out to rbarney@worldteleport.org and join Comtech, Hughes Network Services, Kratos Defense and Security Solutions, Network Innovations Advanced Networks, and Nexsat as members of the board. Today's agenda, once we get past this brief introduction, I'm going to share some key takeaways from that report, and then we're going to launch into a discussion with the people who really are the experts on this topic. And finally, I want to thank 4 companies in particular whose financial support makes it possible to do the research and the webinars that we do. They are the Eutelsat Group, Intelsat, Kratos, and SES. We call them industry leader members of our association, and we're very grateful to them for that support. Okay, the takeaways from this report. This is very, very high level. There's a lot of detail in there. But of course, we're dealing with new rules for the game of being a teleport operator, as well as being a satellite operator. Starlink's changed them. It's driven down capacity pricing. At the same time, it's attracted many new customers to the business. And frankly, it is testing the survival skills of everybody who was in this business before Starlink first launched their first satellite, with much more to come. That new revenue side is, of course, of greatest interest. You're talking about everything from hosting LEO gateways and adding LEO connectivity to managed services, to also the technology side of it, right? The demand for LEO-capable ground equipment is obviously benefiting our technology vendors, as well as driving a great deal of innovation on their part. The efficiency imperative, the one thing that's obvious to everybody who's trying to fight their way into this market is that to remain competitive, you really have to become a much more efficient operator. And that means digitization. It means a virtualization of the ground segment. For the satellite community, it means new geo pricing models, sometimes new satellites in orbit that make that possible. And Starlink, let's face it, has completely changed customer expectations about how terminals, the user terminal, is going to operate. The rest of us need to follow into that trend and compete in that particular ground. But with all of that said, GEO is continuing to have a really enduring value because of the fundamentals of its orbit, the cost efficiency, reliability, and security it can provide. So yes, you're going to see market share erode, our respondents said, but GEO connectivity is still dominant in global revenues and is going to continue to be there for quite a while because they don't necessarily have to have satellites over a lot of water. Okay, our panelists today include Andrew Bond, who is Sales and Marketing Director and a real industry veteran from ETL Systems, maker of all wide range of technology systems. Will Mudge, Chief Technology Officer and Executive Vice President at Speedcast, also a member of WTA's board, and Hagay Katz, who is Chief Product and Marketing Officer at Gilat. So we're very proud to have all of them with us. And gentlemen, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Robert.
I'd like to start by asking each of you to describe briefly how you and your company relate to this topic of the year of the NGSOs. And let's start with Andrew, if you'd be so kind.
I think this is particularly relevant, certainly as we run up to the IBC show in Amsterdam. And I'm talking to you here from London, where I'm currently attending the Defence and Space Show. I've spent a morning on the floor with a number of these new NGSOs that we're seeing. So it's certainly a real disruptor technology that is waking the dinosaur that is the satellite industry up. And there's a lot of talk about how we are going to respond to these satellite constellations, which are very much vertical institution, and they're not involving anyone else. And I think that has been the biggest shock to the teleport operators and to the satellite operators. So from an ETL systems point of view, who I work for and I've been with for 20 years, it's really interesting that we've now got to change our equipment mix to be able to work with the new modern flexible teleport, whether that's a LEO teleport, a teleport that's working with GEO and MEO constellations, or just the old way of doing things. We have got to deal with different frequencies, different forms of switching as we move into this new virtualized world. So yeah, from my point of view, I think it's a great shake-up. And certainly, as I said, on the floor this morning, it's been a major topic of conversation.
I always like talking to people who say, I love disruption. I say, disruption is great until you're the one being disrupted.
Yes.
Will Mudge, could you please tell us how your company and you relate to this topic of the rise of the NGSOs?
Yeah, hey, Robert, thanks. And good morning, good afternoon, good day to everybody. The Speedcast is a managed service provider, but it's interesting because we also run one of the largest non-operator owned teleport structures. So we kind of have both sides of this story, right? We've worked with Starlink since the original days. We're the largest reseller for Starlink. We sell OneWeb, obviously working with the other NGSOs as they come online to be able to offer services to our customers. So it's been very much at the forefront of, for us, how NGSOs have affected our business. And how they affect the GEO at the end of the day too. So we see, Starlink coming up and then the GEO coming down, and how do you bring that best service to your customers at the end of the day?
That's what counts. Okay, Katz, would you please tell us how, I know Gilat has been putting out so many product announcements and contract announcements, I can't keep track of them. So how does that relate to the NGSO market?
Oh, we thank you, Robert. We are very much related. Being a leader in supplying ground equipment, we are very strong on GEO. We are the one that supply MEO to SES, the O3b mPOWER constellation. And definitely, we want to go into the LEO, especially because our customers, which are the satellite operators and the service providers, are affected by the SpaceX Starlink revolution. And definitely, LEO is very much a strategy for us. Trying to work with all of those who are not closed garden. And they can provide us the business. So definitely we see it from the customer side, and we are working very hard to be part of the LEO technology as well.
Hard work does it. You mentioned customers. Will talked about, making sure the customer gets the best service they can get. So I want to just focus on the end customer for a moment. How is the success of Leo so far, and apparently it's even profitable, which is stunning to many people. How do you think that has changed the end customer's expectations for cost, performance, and the user experience? Because it certainly is a change. And Will, maybe you deal with that first.
I think it's been revolutionary, I guess is the best way to put it, right? So many times we've tried to do Leo constellations, but like you said, the sheer cost of getting them up and the complexity that goes along with them to be able to provide a service, I think everybody was rightly skeptical that they would work as well as Starlink does to date. And to date, it's been an amazing service, right? And it continues to be. And I really think it has reset the expectations of all our customers. And now it tends to be the standard by which everyone is measured against, which pros and cons, right? I think as a technologist, right, as somebody who, I went to school for space, I like it, I believe in, and I want to bring that better service to the planet. If you look at it from that perspective, it's been really great to actually see space do what we know it can do and bring to our customers. But then at the same time, I think like Andrew said, it's been disruptive to our industry, and how do we adapt to that? But the fact that Starlink kind of blazed the trail for the NGSOs, they came up, they offered a service, everyone was skeptical. They see it working really well. You're getting these really great bandwidths at a really great price level, and it's really increased the adoption of it. And we talk about increasing market share, and I think people kind of wave a wand at it, but the fact is it does, right? We have it. I mean, we use it almost ubiquitously as our Speedcasters, at our house, or when we go on vacations now, where we weren't carrying a 1.2 meter KU around whenever we did these things before. So it's pretty interesting to see how it's gotten into our lives and it has become a core part of it, and has really galvanized a base level expectation for what we want these things to be. And now it makes it very challenging when you try to show a geo to be able to operate at those same levels. Or for OneWeb, OneWeb's great because now people trust the Leos, but they have a certain baseline expectation of performance. And can you meet that same performance the same way, or how do you make those systems work? So it's been good and bad from many perspectives of it. But the bottom line is it really is a fantastic thing. And I think it's really pushed our industry forward. Just to maybe add a little bit more, I've done a number of these panels with you, as you recall, and over the years, we always get the question around, when are satellite providers going to adopt cell phone waveforms, LTE and 5G waveforms? And you're seeing it, right? And it's great. Starlink uses it, OneWeb uses it, and you're going to see more and more of it that way. But it's interesting that it took that catalyst to drive us that direction. And now when you look at, the post NGSO years, how is that going to react? Well, you're going to have to see how other people adopt to this new technology.
Change is always like that, isn't it? There's the boulder sitting on the hill, and it sits there, and it's just there for 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years. And then enough finally gets washed out from underneath the front of it that it rolls down the hill. Hagay, how about you? I mean, both your customers, of course, are the satellite and teleport operator community, but you also have to be mindful of what they're telling you their customers need. What are you seeing?
I think the answer is different from different end customers. Some of the customers tell us that Leo, or I guess not Leo, but the Starlink service is not, in some cases, is not good enough, or is not perfect for them. Some of the cases, it is very good. I give some examples. In-flight connectivity, we are very strong in in-flight connectivity, and I think that the end users, the airlines, the service providers, still in IFC, they don't find the right answers with the Starlink limitations. Not Leo, but Starlink specifically. On the other end, cellular backhaul again, we see customers telling us that that in some situations the lack of best effort, the lack of committed information rates and quality of service is not good enough. On the other hand, I think some of the customers are very happy. I think we'll mention the consumer and I guess some of the enterprise, they're very happy. So all in all, I think that it is clear that there is a big disruption. It is clear that there is very high value for this, but it depends which customers we are talking about and how you tailor the solution for him.
Sure. Well, one size does not fit all. I often think about Starlink and then everything, the rest of the satellite community as being like the difference between a Wi-Fi network for your office, which, frankly, as long as it's good enough, it's good enough, versus the kind of wireless network that runs in an automated warehouse or factory, which is mission critical and it has to work. So yeah, it's an interesting model. Andrew, what are you hearing from your direct customers, but also what are the end customer demands that are coming through for your kind of technology?
I've had a number of conversations ahead of this session about this subject, and I think it's the ease of operation that we've now got with Starlink. I think it takes between 15 and 20 minutes to set it up if you know roughly what you're doing. And a colleague tried to set up a VSAT terminal. It took him most of the day. I'm not saying he was particularly good technically, but it shows the difference. It's very much a plug and play system. And it's fantastic whether you're a marine operator, Navy, or just normal vessels. Particularly emergency services where you haven't got comms and you want to have an emergency backup. I know a number of search and rescue units that use Starlink already, and they can be operational with passing data into hospitals within minutes. So that needs to be replicated, certainly by our crews. And a form of that, if you look back to the BGAN terminal Inmarsat used to use with news crews, that was pretty quick to operate as well. So I think we need to remember it's not only cheap, but it's easy to use, and it's designed for the consumer as well, which I think is where hopefully Kuiper and Starlink have certainly got it absolutely right. I'm certainly sitting here now worried about how that we haven't been, as the old style SATCOMs industry, we haven't been invited to the party as these constellations have been developed. And there are a number of conversations where people are invited up to meet Starlink, and they were definitely not going to be using their antennas or the old way of doing things. And I think, going back to my point, the disruption of technology, not including what technology is already there, has been a real shock to the old market. And I think price and speed of setup and the fact that we're not invited to the table, it's made a real change in how we're reaching our customers. But finally, the important thing, Starlink is working because of NSR reports showing this massive growth in future data. And that's what it's carrying, and it's carrying well. GEO still has its place. Big pipe, big dishes, big satellites. And certainly the likes of the Olympics recently in Paris required GEO capacity. And there are many reasons which we'll come on to in a minute where GEO is not dead and there's a good use for it. And that's where we have to work in harmonization with LEO.
I just want to call out one of the points you made there. I mean, basically, you were sketching out a future in which if we can make services that are not running on Starlink or Eutelsat OneWeb or Kuiper as easy to integrate and set up, turn on, and get results as they are, we've just solved one of our major problems. So it's a huge thing. But Will, I want to turn back around to you because Speedcast has been unusually successful in apparently breaking through that barrier that Andrew was talking about. You have SpaceX, Starlink, they do it all themselves. They don't care what anybody else tells them. And that tends to be a Silicon Valley-esque approach that you see a lot of from the NGSOs, but Speedcast has got a very deep relationships with those companies. So could you talk, without obviously telling us something you shouldn't, could you tell us what made that possible? Well, I asked a really good question because he has to pause to think about it.
I had to take myself off mute first too. Got to remember how to do a meeting. I think a lot of it was we spent a lot of time with Starlink up front. Andrew, you used the words, not invited to the table. And I feel that's kind of like a push-pull type of a mechanism, right? We kind of forced ourselves in at the table, for lack of a better way to put it. I think, and you'll remember, I think Joe galvanized the first reseller contract with them. We were able to kind of break ground that way. And we've done a number of innovations that way. I also think, I guess we believed in their technology early on where many didn't. And I guess that may have given us an advantage in how we look at it and how we look at a service. But we came at it from the perspective of what's best for our end user at the end of the day. How do we make that best for them? Does Geo have its place, like Andrew said? Yeah, absolutely. It's got its place, especially as you have a new technology that people are unsure of. How do you get them comfortable with it? But how do you help their IT department stay on the cutting edge, especially when you have, Starlink is of this reasonable enough cost that an offshore oil worker can use their credit card and buy it, bring it out offshore and put it on the rig completely around their corporate IT. So it kind of forces you down that path where you have to do it, right? So you really need to help partner with them and get them through those hurdles. The other thing, Andrew, you said, Starlink is an enterprise, and that's right. It was set up originally as residential, but I think they did get a lot of it right because we've used those kits in many enterprise applications and they're working well. And going down this path, it very much sounds like we're super pro Starlink, and we've been told that in the past as well. And I don't know that it's necessarily that we're pro anyone, but we're definitely pro user experience, right? And Starlink is giving that very good user experience, regardless of what the hardware looks like or all these other things. They brought a very good value to that end customer that we can marry into the rest of the business. And yeah, it does affect Geo, and it affects the business model that goes with it, and affects the teleports that go along with it. But it's here, right? And they've brought it up and they've stood up on their own, and they've done a fantastic job with it. Why wouldn't we embrace it when you look at it from an end user's perspective?
Interesting. That's very interesting. So loyalty to the customer is basically the only thing you need to be loyal to. The technology is just got to go where it's going to go.
You got rolled punch.
Like that. Okay, so obviously when this all began, in fact, a year ago, I was sitting in the audience at World Satellite Business Week, and somebody said, "The elephant in the room, Starlink. Everybody, can we talk about it?" And now, of course, we are all talking about it. What changes, and this is for all three of you, what changes are you making in your services, your products, your customer service in response to this impact, this invasion makes it sound like they're the enemy, this entry into the marketplace of these new service providers. Hagay, why don't we start with you, because you referenced some of the things, some of the areas where the NGSO services are provide the value for money, and other places where they don't. So how have you had to adjust your technology portfolio to take advantage of that?
We certainly had deep discussions about it, and we decided that we want to put emphasis on the places where we have value, and where the market will be more defensive against Starlink. And on the one hand, so we are going very strongly into the in-flight connectivity, where we see this happening. We are of course very strong on cellular backhaul. We've been always very strong there, and we think our customers still tell us that they need different things from what Starlink can give them. And we definitely put a focus on defense, where we think that defense is also a business that is very promising for us. from technology point of view, we are working very hard to penetrate into the new LEO opportunities. OneWeb next generation, Telesat, Rivada, Iris Square coming, and so forth. So we think that LEO is very important for us, and we want to help the competitors of Starlink to be very strong. And definitely we are trying to provide a combination of GEO, MEO, and LEO as a solution that is stronger for the end customers. And this comes into places like electronic steered antennas that are dual use for GEO and MEO. We do it for business aviation, for commercial aviation. We announced the acquisition of Stellar Blue. And we also do, as I said, antennas for LEO. And we are providing the technology for MEO to be competitive in terms of speed, in terms of SLA. So both looking into the segments of the business where we think we can do better, and also strengthening the portfolio to be multi-orbit, to provide the places where the solution of a lot of bandwidth and without and only best effort is not good enough. And one thing that I want to say to finish is that I think we heard a very good remark that the user experience that Starlink are providing is very good and is a game changer. And we are also working towards this. So we are putting a lot of focus on the user experience to provide easier installation, easier monitoring, quick installation, and so forth to our products. I think this is a good comment.
Obviously, it's what the customer, once the customer tastes it, they want it. I was very interested in your remark there about supporting the competitors to Starlink, and it just not because Starlink isn't a great company, but the market obviously is healthier if there's more providers and they're all making money. So I think it was an interesting point of view. Thank you. Andrew, how about you? What changes are, I know there are changes happening to your product line. What specifically is going on that will adapt to this brave new world?
I think our relationship really with the LEO constellations has to be in the gateways. And we've designed a number of switch matrices which allow fast switching as you have tracking antennas moving between various lines of satellites moving overhead. But the big change for us is the digitization of the RF ground segment. That is a main game changer. And I know that Susan Sadat, who also sits on your WTA board with you from ETL Systems, is a real advocate of this technology. And we also are part of this new consortium called DIFI. And this is a fantastic new way of pushing the RF signal around the place. I mean, it's digitizing the ground segment, and I think it allows a minimal amount of equipment to be used at the antenna end, and it allows a centralization of encoders and decoders. It also has benefits from cost, security, and interoperability. So this again is a major game changer, as well as the LEO constellations for the ground segment. And we've got a new product called Genus Digital, amongst others, which is an open standard that's been tested with the whole of the DIFI range of products to allow RF signals to be passed over IP. And as we're able to get narrower bandwidths from LEO, we're able to use our lighter versions, our DIFI Edge versions of that. That allows us to operate with this LEO constellation, as well as our wider bandwidth, which operate with GEO constellations. So that's pushing a number of providers, not only ETL, but Kratos plays a big part in this as well. And certainly digitization is a major game changer. And it would have come anyway, but I think the versions of it have been pushed forward. as LEO has become more of a dominant force.
Yeah, we're Diffie is a partner at WTA, and I often reflect that, boy, their time, nothing like timing.
Yeah.
They started down this road. Standards development is tough. It takes a long time, but boy, what a huge commercial driver there is for that.
It is, and when we get the cost right, Robert, I think as we eat up all the design costs and we start to actually make it affordable, it will be seen in pretty much every teleport as one of the ways of moving signals from antennas around globally. It needs pretty fast Ethernet pipe at the moment, but I think narrower bandwidths certainly are able to operate on 10 gigabits and less Ethernet speeds.
All right, well, my completely non-expert opinion is in agreement with yours. Well, so you, I almost don't want to ask you this question because the list goes on for so long. You came out of the pandemic as a completely new company almost, or it seemed like it. So you have made a number of adaptations to this business. What are some of the ones that stick out for you?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is really going to be how we bring multiple services together, right? When you look at LEO or GEO or LTE or whatever it turns out to be at the end of the day, especially I think you have a question about verticalization. When you look at all of these guys and they're kind of bringing their own standalone type of solutions, how do you bring those solutions to the customer? And we've seen SD-WAN progress to a level where it's really become a game changer for how you can do this, because now you can have not just Starlink running, but GEO running, and you can have L-band running, and you can have other LTE or other types of connections running, and you can put data down all of them at the exact same time, as compared to kind of the old days where you would run this link as the primary link, and then whenever that one went down, you would switch over to the backup link. It's really made a difference in that customer service level and that expectation, and it's kind of moved. Interestingly enough, the value add becomes congestion management, because now you're starting to look at what traffic and why that traffic, and is that traffic in the right spot? And this guy's playing a video game. We don't need him playing a video game in the offshore rig and taking everybody else's bandwidth. How do we stop him so that everybody else can do what they want to do? So it's kind of moved beyond the discussion of megahertz and conversion to megabits, and into how do we better improve that experience? And a lot of that's through that software, whether it's SD-WAN or other softwares that we use, firewalls and the likes. Because the other thing that Starlink did that we've said it before, but when you have the GEO world, we would backhaul all of the internet over the GEO pipe to the teleport and exfil the data at the teleport. So you could put a firewall on and you maintain IP addresses and so on. But Starlink being a distributed system, you're moving that IP address to your remote site. So you don't have that control, you don't have that security that goes along with it. And honestly, the remote sites, I don't think we're ready necessarily to take that jump, because now you have to add more complexity at the remote site that you have to manage in a particular way. And when you look at how do you help them evolve to that state where they can use securely Starlink in a way that they're comfortable with, and you can meet corporate security requirements and so on, you've got to consider that as part of it. So when you look at our services and how we changed our services, I think we switched from just a bandwidth reseller to a true managed service provider, where you're looking at the service to the customer, not the service as the bandwidth, if that makes sense.
It does, and I think that you made a point there that I think is pretty powerful, which is, as human beings, we always cling to the competitive advantage that has been working for us for quite a while, and then mysteriously it stops working, and we still want to cling to it. But instead, this industry is being forced to evolve at a high rate, and nobody likes being forced, but nonetheless, it's always good for us. So,
but it's interesting because it's not just us, right? It's
Mhm.
not just the equipment providers or the GEO operators or managed service providers. It's our customers too, right? They're being forced to change how they've bought and how they've budgeted, and what they consider those links to be. I mean, if you could imagine going, like we talked about earlier, you go to a company that has people out in a remote site, and those people are angry because you're only giving them a 256K link or something. But yeah, they can take their corporate credit card and go buy a Starlink, and all of a sudden they can FaceTime with their loved ones. How are you going to stop them from doing that? You can't. And you got to get it into the corporate environment, so you're helping them move over to it. And then they've got to look at their business model and say, okay, we budgeted for this last year, but that's all changed and we need to redo it over here to this. And then, oh, by the way, we have this whole new set of challenges that we need to deal with because of it.
I once talked to an IT manager in a major business. He said one of the biggest innovators in our business is our users who, if we don't give them what they want, just go right around us.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And then everybody gets upset when you can't control it.
Correct. You mentioned the verticalization, and I'm old enough to remember when Viasat was the elephant in the room, because they were offering this verticalized pipe that was selling megabits, not megahertz, and all of a sudden the teleport operators felt that they had just been disintermediated out of the equation. You've described how using SD-WAN can help with that. I want to sort of turn back to Andrew and say, this is a fact of life now. Pretty much every one of your customers is going to have verticalized services on there where they don't control it in the same old way. How does that change what you're offering to them?
It goes back to I don't think our offering is from a equipment supplier point of view. We still have to remain relevant to whoever is staring at a satellite. We're already seeing this move into Q and V band, and we are seeing a push in the amount of data that's now being lost by GEOs, that's now moving to LEOs. But it doesn't stop the fact that we are still in a data-hungry world, and certainly video and capacity, and it goes back to Hagay's point. I've already heard that you try and increase capacity on a LEO constellation, and it doesn't like it. It stops operating. The other negative side, which is worth talking about, and probably William can give me probably disagree on this. I've heard that the SLA issue is one that some people don't like in using LEO constellations or Starlink as a commodity, because Ofcom likes to have SLAs, or all the broadcast regulators in countries like to have a 98-99% ability to stay in service. And certainly this is something that Starlink is currently not offering. And so in my view, this is a bit of a weakness, which falls back to the fact that GEO is able to provide that service, and therefore GEO will remain relevant as long as that SLA issue is still there.
And maybe I could just
go ahead.
All right, for a minute, Andrew. I think you're spot on, right? There's even some countries where companies are not allowed to buy without having an SLA, and without Starlink having that SLA, it's really slowed that part of it down. And absolutely, GEO offers an SLA. So this is where you use something like SD-WAN, and you can tie those two things together so you can augment if there is an outage where that outage is going to lie. We've certainly seen them doing software updates and have other challenges where the availability can come into question of it. But I will say this, when it first came out, we put a lot of weight behind the SLA piece of it. And it was interesting to see how fast some of our customers came off of the required SLAs when they got the service. And we can't forget that SLAs are there because somebody just wants a service to work at the end of the day. And as long as that service works, they don't really care about what the SLA is. But when it starts to have problems is when you really start to see the SLAs come into place. Now, there's some differences with energy, like where you have to have it because safety laws and the things that go along with that. But SLAs may have been imposed on us, suggesting because we had issues with services. And as long as the service is up and running, nobody really talks about an SLA, right? You don't need the stick if everything is working just fine. So, when you look at, and Robert, I think I've touched the question that somebody put in here, will satellite operators be relevant with multiple NGSO players in the market? I think the answer is still yes. And Andrew, for a lot of the reasons that you brought up, SLAs being one of them and broadcast is another. But not to mention that these assets are still in the sky with lifetimes ahead of them, right? Many years left on many of the satellites that are in orbit. They're not going to go away. They're still going to be there. They're still going to be usable. They're still going to be viable no matter what LEOs you put in the sky. Now, the question is what's the service that's going to be on them and how much do you offer at what price? Now that is the real question when you look at, will they remain viable in the market? Well, it's up to them, right? The service level expectation has been set for how much bandwidth you have and what you cost for it. And if you give somebody, in this hand, I'm going to sell you Starlink and you're going to get this, or I could sell you Geo and you're going to get this, which hand are you going to pick? I think that really starts to become the question, and what Geo operators need to really think hard about as they look forward.
But William, just responding to that, you've got to consider the vertical that you're selling to. If it's a commercial application, you've got guys on a luxury cruise liner, you can get away with it. Possibly somebody's internet in the Midwest, you can get away with it. But if you've got a military crew in a remote location, you need to have those SLAs to keep those guys in comms, and operability needs to be 24/7. And that's where we go back to defending the role of Geo and other constellations to make sure that we have a reliable network for those that really, really need it. And we don't find it switched off, and it's available, because Geo can provide spot routes and it can adapt its capacity to demand. And LEOs are covering 2/3 of this world is ocean, and most of that, people aren't living on the ocean, so there's a lot of wasted capacity going overhead, and that's where Geo starts to become relevant again.
Well, I can tell this is a debate that's going to be actually a debate for the next couple of years. Maybe not that long, but at least a year. Yeah, are SLAs the relic of a time when you couldn't actually do what the customer wanted you to do, or are they something that's going to retain value? I don't know.
I think
value.
Hagay, I'd like to hear from you, Hagay.
Yeah. Look, I think there is one very strong parameter here that is playing for the benefit of Starlink at this time. As an engineer, the Geo with the SLA is giving enormous advantages in many situations, and the fact that it is a high delay in many of the application is not so important. So still, you ask why is this disruption is all over the place, and one of the main reasons is that the Geo capacity size at this point is not good enough to compete with the sheer capacity of Starlink. Starlink managed to catch the industry by surprise, or not by surprise, to catch the industry with ability to supply unlimited capacity in some cases, in some places, not all of them, but many of them, where the Geo and also the MEO in some cases, MEO less, but Geo in some cases do not have this ability. Assuming we had software-defined satellites of terabits per second in the sky, like this was the intention of Viasat, HNS, Intelsat, SES, everybody to put these satellites in the sky, the picture would have been different, because the play that you sell capacity for low prices and you just throw capacity bandwidth on the problem was not good enough for Starlink anymore. Geo suppliers and of course MEO suppliers could have provide good prices, very good SLA in the right places in the right time. Today, what we see in some of the cases that they cannot do it because there is not enough supply. Once this problem is going to be solved, we will see a different picture. So that's one parameter we didn't talk about. Still, things like user experience, things like cost of ESA going down, they are all very important parameters that Starlink brought to the game, and we need to deal with that. But I think at the moment, supply of very high throughput satellite is missing for the business of Geo.
A very interesting point of view. So more to come in that area. Thank you for that. And I also want to apologize to one of our attendees. Will, thank you for bringing that question up. I couldn't see it for some reason, so I appreciate your flagging this question, which was, will geo satellite operators be relevant with multiple NGSOs? And that's what we've been talking about for the last couple of minutes. I want to turn to just sort of this, these two words now that are everywhere: multipath, multi-orbit. We're all now in the multipath, multi-orbit future. But all of you have referred to the fact that there are, it all depends upon what your application is. Where are you? So who are the primary drivers for this multi-path, multi-orbit future in terms of the customer segment? I mean, Andrew, you raised, defense as a key driver. I know the defense industry is really interested in virtualization of the ground segment for just that reason. I got that right?
Yeah, I think just thinking about a sort of sensible answer to your question that hasn't repeated everything that we've already said. I agree with you. It's the verticals and it's the use cases that will depend on which constellation is most relevant to the application, whether it's military or marine or emergency services. I've written down here what's going on in various war zones in Eastern Europe is a typical indicator of how SATCOMs is currently used. I mean, we've currently seen a fantastic use of Maxar, which is I think it's a MEO satellite from memory, which is providing high definition imagery, not only of farmland, but also of movements in the area. So, there is an application which is fantastic. Some of the natural disasters we've seen recently, some of the old Fukushima one really showed how we need to have available satellite capacity to provide for care in the community on the ground. That was a disaster zone that was not set up, and people had real issues in providing service there, and that was a wake-up zone as well. But I go back to spot beams and adapting the capacity to demand for GEO. I think this to me is where GEO becomes relevant, and also its capacity with high throughput video traffic. Certainly drones, they are a fantastic application and are very data hungry. And because of their application and use, they need to go through private networks to whichever place is going to watch the video of those cameras. So there is another reason why I am very much an advocate of GEOs. But I think the satellite industry now needs to work together, and this interoperability between the constellations needs to start to work. This harmonization and the multi-layered coordination, that's where we need to work to actually make sure that 5G, 6G, LEO and GEO is all becoming relevant. And this goes back to, I've just talked to our Chief Engineering Officer, Paul Gowes, about this. And he's an expert on this area, and this is software. Ground services, ground segment as a service, and software adapted payloads. This is where we need to move into, and certainly that multi-constellation, multi-waveform integration is a vision that we all need to work together to achieve.
Well, competing like crazy with each other. Hagay, any thoughts on that multi-orbit, multi-path future? I mean, who's going to be the customers? Who are going to be the customers?
First, we launched the SkyEdge4. It is the latest of our SkyEdge family, and it is the first multi-orbit VSAT systems. It is a GEO plus MEO system. The MEO system, we didn't talk enough about MEO. I think there are great advantages for MEO in many use cases where high capacity with very good SLA is required. Just to mention, we are supporting today a global maritime service of SES that is GEO plus MEO. So in this respect, a single system never mind which orbit, which capacity, you can use the same terminal, same management system, same hubs to do both, which is, you know, OpEx saving, and of course much easier for the end customers as well, not only for the satellite operators. So I think definitely multi-orbit, and I mentioned GEO plus LEO for in-flight connectivity, which is, you know, OneWeb today is providing, is going strong into IFC together with the GEO. So we see this also coming as a multi-orbit, and accordingly the antennas and accordingly the systems that will be done. Today, it's two different systems. Maybe in the future, it's going to be a single system, but that's less important. I think the combination is very strong. Also for maritime, I'm sure William can tell you that he's working on such a combination of GEO plus LEO, or MEO plus GEO plus LEO, whatever he thinks is the best for the customer. So and again, also for the defense application, I think Andrew mentioned that defense needs different ways to protect the availability, and that's one of the things to do that. So all in all, I believe that multi-orbit is here and now, and it's not a defensive against only LEO. It is a real need. And as I said, once there is plenty of capacity, I think today on MEO, once there will be more capacity on GEO, we will see this becoming a strong tool for service providers.
Very interesting. Will, so yeah, you are in several niches, all of which are getting the same service. I'm curious about, you know, first of all, what those are, but also what are some of the new niches that you think might be opening up?
Yeah, so I mean, just to go back, you know, I've been with Speedcast a long time, longer than I care to remember all my gray hairs that I've earned over the years. But you may remember the Harris Caprock one we did, where it was a tri-band antenna multi-orbit, you know, more than 10 years ago. You know, I think predating even the Intellian 240. So we've been down this path of working on these multi-orbit, multi-path solutions for a long time, right? I think it's something that's been in the industry since O3B first started, and I think we put it on Royal Caribbean the first. So I mean, we're very proud of that legacy and that history that goes along with it. I think what's different these days is originally we had envisioned it as taking that, let's say, tri-band terminal and being able to use the same terminal or the same modem across multiple constellations. And then how do you choose and switch between those constellations? And interestingly enough, what's materialized is kind of the opposite. The players have chosen to verticalize more than, you know, as Andrew said earlier, get invited to the table and be able to use that technology and leverage existing equipment that's out there. Now you're looking at adding a Starlink terminal, or adding a OneWeb terminal, or adding an mPOWER terminal that goes along with these things. And then it makes the customer's lives a lot easier, because you don't have that significant investment per se into a very large, very capable terminal, as compared to, you know, and you're buying Inmarsat GX, or you're buying Viasat, or you're buying, you know, Starlink, right? You can just buy these verticalized services and then marry them together for whatever your actual end application is. So let's say you're an energy customer, right? You can use Starlink, but yet, to Andrew's point, you very much have that availability issue. So why don't you buy verticalized L-band and put those two together? Now you have your availability solved, although it's not high bandwidth, but you've got very little outage time with your Starlink, so you're not using it that often. So does that work for you? Now you can start to look at your package combinations like that, which has been very interesting as compared to trying to buy something that's going to suit all time and work forward with it. It's given a bit more flexibility to our customers, I think, in how we pick and choose what solutions they end up getting, and then of course how you bring those together and put the data across it.
It's a very interesting point. Interesting. You're right, because we did spend a lot of time trying to create the one terminal to rule them all, and it turns out that that's not really required. Fascinating. We're getting close to the end here. I guess I'll ask if any of you, as Andrew said, we've covered a lot of ground here, and without repeating ourselves, is there anything that have left unsaid in this very, very interesting discussion? I really want to thank you for all you've contributed to it. Anybody?
I think we we didn't speak about the what so-called 5G NTN, 5G non-terrestrial. Maybe it's too far away, so we are all practical people here. But I think that yes, the 5G NTN is something that may be the next disruption in the industry. It will take time, but definitely we are looking at that, and we are very active on understanding all the requirements and how to navigate to this end.
Well, okay, so stay tuned for the next disruption. Anybody want to make a prediction when we're going to start seeing it? 3 years? 2 years? 5 years? Tomorrow, next year? No, we're
No,
gonna
it will definitely takes, I think, 3 to 5 years before we will see anything.
Yeah, and I think that's probably pretty close to the reality. Okay, so I really want to offer my very sincere thanks to our panelists, Andrew Bond, Will Mudge, and Hagay Katz. This is one of the more interesting webinars we've ever put on, so it's entirely due to them. Thank you also for joining us. I hope you took away as much as I did. We'd appreciate it if you'd fill out our online survey after the webinar. That feedback helps us shape this program. Also, a reminder, you can download a free summary version of the Year of the NGSOs from the chat in this webinar, but also you can go to our website and check it out. It's free for WTA member, anybody who works for a WTA member company and is registered on our site, and is available for a price for those others. Coming up in the future shortly, IBC, WTA is going to be there, along with probably some of the people you're seeing in this webinar, followed immediately by World Space Business Week, which I will be attending. And then in October, Silicon Valley Space Week. So if you have any interest in connecting with WTA at any of those events, please do send an email to rbarney@worldteleport.org. And then coming up in the future, AI in the teleport that I inadvertently included in this presentation is being published actually very, very shortly in this month of September. And of course, it's focusing on, well, AI. I mean, everybody else is talking about it, so it's time for us to talk about it in the teleport sector. And then coming in November will be another one of these rather broad-based studies, ground segment for the very high throughput generation, right? All these things we've been talking about are ultimately high throughput or very high throughput solutions. And so as it all becomes one big, happy, high throughput industry, what is that going to make possible in the future? So again, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll look forward to having you with us next time. Gentlemen, thanks so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Robert. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Heidi.